Welcome to It Is What It Is, a true crime podcast. I am Shaw Marie, and today's episode, y'all, I might have to stop a couple of times, may or may not, who knows, haven't read it yet, and I haven't read it, and I'll tell you why. But today's episode is a sexual abuse story, so warning, and if you don't want to tune in for that, don't. But this story is from my little adopted sister, Kylee. She's not really adopted. She's more adopted in the sense that when I'm 30 now, so about, I want to say, 10 or 11, give or take, I met her brothers and became best friends with them, long life best friends. I'm still very dear friends with her older brother. And so we just have become family in that sense. So I call her my little sister, so that clears that up. So I honestly didn't even know that she had a story to tell until recently when she posted it on Facebook, and she kind of gave like a rough draft of that story, and I cried like a bitch. So I mean, if I do end up bawling, I will pause it. But the reason why I haven't read the actual full-blown story yet is because if I do, and when I read it, because I am so attached to her, I feel like I will take out things that I don't want people to judge her on, and so obviously that's not what she wrote it for. So just a caution, a pre-warning. It's a little bit harder of an episode today than normal, mainly just because I am truly in love with this person. She's an amazing person, amazing. And she's turned out to be the greatest mom, the greatest, just fucking greatest kid in the world. And before I make you all sad and about her story, a little fun fact about her. When she was little, because me and her older brothers, obviously we had our own shit going on, so we were all fucked up in the head. But when I say that she was like the baddest little fucking kid in the world, she really was. Like, we used to have her go around the neighborhood, and we would host our own like little like kids fight club, like a kids fight club. And we would have the kids around the neighborhood, like legitly the children around the neighborhood, beat each other up. And she was our golden match, man. She'd always kick ass. So that's just a funny little story. I just like to tell people that because she was a hard ass. And I love her to pieces. Okay, and I'm getting nervous. So I guess we'll just get to it. Okay. It says, this event happened when I had barely turned 10 years old. Dr. Noel Lee Robertson was at the time 65 years old. He killed himself at 66. My very best friend lived right up the road from me, about 5 blocks, right across the street from elementary school. Her dad was a doctor. He was also a leading minister at our church. There were 3 kids, my friend, her slightly older brother, and younger sister. Anytime I was not in school, I was at their house. I usually would end up eating dinner there, and then she and her brother would walk me down the hill to my house. My mom had me meet Lee my mom had met Lee and even had a few full conversations with him, but she did not know him prior. My best friend was going to be baptized. My family, however, had also planned a camping trip that same weekend. I begged and I begged to stay at my friend's house for the weekend so my family could go camping and I could go to her baptism. My mom eventually agreed when she dropped me off there before leaving town. I remember playing outside with his kids while they talked. I don't remember hearing everything discussed, but I did overhear some of the conversations, just going over nightly routine, etc. When I was young, I had a quote unquote wetting the bed problem. By the time I was 7 or so, this had already had taken care of, and I no longer had constant a constant issue with it. I had heard my mom mention to him that I once in a while would have accidents, so to make sure I go to the bathroom before bed, no drinks after 8, etc. Just so you guys know, I'm getting nervous. The rest of the day carried on as normal. The first night he told me that my mom told him to rub the lower part of my stomach, upper part of my private area, to help me not have accidents. I knew that they had talked about accidents, and I also knew that he was a doctor. He told me we would wait till the kids go to bed so they don't have to know I had a quote unquote problem with wetting the bed. He told me he doesn't want me to, quote, lose my friends, end quote, because of this problem. Again, in quotations. So, as uncomfortable as it was, after all the kids were laying in their beds, I laid my head on his lap, feet facing the side of the couch, and he lifted my shirt slightly and pressed the front of my pants slightly down. Also, then he started massaging the area of my body between my stomach and my pelvis. The whole time I just closed my eyes and thought about anything else I could and kept reminding myself. He said my mom said this was okay. He knows what he's doing. He believes in God. He would never hurt me. I eventually fell asleep. Woke up in bed next to my friend. Nothing seemed wrong. The next day, the day carried on as normal. He woke us up but pulled me aside to ask if I slept better. I told him I didn't feel any different. He then asked me if I had a, quote, accident. I told him, quote, no, but I do not have them that often anyways. He said, very good, and we all went about our day. Nothing seemed out of place except my feelings. I felt the need to stay in a separate room from him, a feeling that this was a quote-unquote secret, so if the other kids saw us even in the same room, they would know. I felt a pit in my stomach all day. Something was wrong, but I couldn't eventually tell what it was. He kept reassuring me that I was safe and that he was only trying to help and that my mom told him to do this. That night, the kids went to bed and he told me to come lie down. I told him I don't think I need this. Will just go to the bathroom. I told him I avoided drinking liquids all day, so I didn't have anything to worry about. And he told me even if I do not have accidents, there is something wrong with my body to cause this, and this will cure it. He told me my mom told him to do this. So again, uncomfortable, I laid my head again on his lap. Again, this time he was not so gentle. He instead forced his hand under my panties. He instead forced his hand under my panties, seemed instead to pull them down slightly. I was just laying there, eyes closed, trying to focus my mind anywhere but there. I eventually started faking asleep, hoping he would stop. I started to make snoring sounds, but he did not stop. In fact, his hand his hand seemed to slide down a little further. I felt this, so I need turn my body over and forced his. I felt this, so I turned my body over, forcing his hand out of my pants, still pretending to sleep, worried what would happen if he knew I wasn't. He then pulled me into a sitting up position and told me, "You are awake. You need to go to the bathroom." I got up and started heading to the bathroom, and he followed me. He then came in and shut the door and locked it. He sat at the edge of the bathtub facing me and told me to go to the bathroom. He will help me stand up since I was so tired. I attempted to shoo him away, but he grabbed my hand and turned me around. He pulled down my bottoms and sat me on the toilet. I started to cry and went pee. And then he pulled my pants completely off and then leaned me on his shoulder as if to hug me to make me feel better. I then got up and went to put on my bottoms, and he said, "You do not need those. Come lay down and I will massage you again." I told him I was going to go lay down in bed. He told me he will only do it till I go to sleep, and then he will put me in bed just like the night before. Crying, shaking, absolutely terrified, I went with him back to the couch. He put a blanket over me and a pillow under my head on his lap, seeming to try to make me more comfortable. His son was sleeping on the couch across from us, so he reminded me to be quiet. He let me get comfortable, and then I started to actually fall asleep until the second I felt his hand all the way down, rubbing where I knew for sure he was not supposed to. I went to grab his hand and pull it away. He grabbed mine and held it so tight as he could above my head. And then he aggressively yanked my legs apart and started shoving his fingers in me. At this time, I was bawling, begging him to stop. I was trying to force my legs together so tight as I could to get him to stop. He carried on with this for what felt like to me a lifetime. In reality, it was only a few moments. His son started to shift around, so he released his hand and pulled his hand away from me. He pulled the blanket cover up over me and pulled his fingers to his face and smelt them. I pushed the part of the blanket covering my legs between my legs, shaking. I laid here till I thought he fell asleep. Eventually, I got up and grabbed my pants from the bathroom. I went to his daughter's room, climbed onto the top bunk with her. I wrapped both of us tightly as I could in her blanket, wrapped my legs around her, and twisted my fingers in her hair, thinking of anything I could do so if he followed me and tried to grab me, she would wake up. I was laying there crying and trying to gently wake her up and tell her, but she would not budge. Lee walked in and said he could hear me. He asked me if I needed help falling back asleep. I ignored him, hoping he would think I was asleep. I then felt his hands filling up on the bed for me. I felt them touching the blanket and my back. I felt him pulling the blanket's edge out and under me as he tried to pry me out of bed. I literally did not know what to do. I held my breath. I held it as long as I could to avoid moving at all. He stopped for a few moments and it seemed like he left the room. I finally took a deep breath and went to looking up. He was standing there next to the bed, arms in the air as if he was about to start trying to grab me again. He grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the bed. At this point, I still used my hand entangled into his daughter's hair to pull, and he yelled her name to wake her and tried to wake her up. She literally didn't budge, didn't even twitch, which to this day makes me think she was holding her breath too, faking asleep, doing everything she could to protect herself. Once I was on the ground, I ran ahead of him to the living room and went and laid next to his son on the other couch, tucking myself in between him and the back of the couch. He grunted a little, and Lee sat on the other couch. I did the same thing, wrapping my arms and legs around him, reaching my fingers up into his hair, kept doing things to try to wake him up, pulling his hair slightly, kicking him. Lee then came over and tried to pull me up, but I used my nails and dug into the back of his son in the head and the neck, making him wake up slightly. He turned toward me and hugged me back. At that moment, Lee finally backed off. He went and laid on the other couch and laid down to fall to sleep, which to this day makes me think he knew he was protecting me. He knew holding me back, I was safe. I waited to hear Lee snoring, and then I looked up carefully to see him sleeping. I kept looking around the room, trying to see where their phone was to call my mom. In that moment, all I wanted was to hear my mom's voice. I wanted to ask her why she let him do this to me, and ask her to come and save me. As I was laying there looking around, I eventually fell asleep. I remember seeing his phone next to his head on the armrest of the couch, trying to think of how I could sneak it without him waking, trying to decide whether it was worth the risk of him catching me, thinking about what he would have done if he did catch me, and what excuse I could tell him. The next morning was the day of the baptism. When I woke up, all I felt was pain and disgust. The worst part of all of this, I felt like I was disgusting, not him. My stomach hurt, worse than it may have ever hurt before. When I went to the bathroom and when I wiped, I was bleeding a little. I wanted to see my best friend be baptized. So I helped them all get ready so we could walk down to my house and get some of my stuff too. As the three of us walked down the hill, I wanted nothing more than to tell them what happened. We walked in silence, but I kept playing the conversation again and again in my head, scared of what they would say and do, scared they would hate me, blame me, scared they wouldn't believe me, and worst of all, scared that they would know exactly what I was talking about. When we got to my house, my mom had just arrived and started cleaning out the camper. I ran up to her and hugged her. At that moment, I started crying. She asked me what is wrong, so I told her. I told her everything, all of the details, the feelings and the pain. I told her I wanted to go to the baptism. I didn't want my friend to know. When I got done, she told me to repeat what happened, so I told her again, all the details, all the feelings, all the pain. My mom bawled and she held me. I begged her to let me go to the baptism, and I promised I would come straight home afterward. She agreed, needing time to process this herself. While walking me back to the house, I tried to tell my friends. I asked them if their dad ever hurt them or ever done anything to their privates. I asked them if they had ever seen him do anything to their sisters. I tried to dig up something, hoping that they would admit they felt me holding them, or that they would believe me if I told them. I told them he touched my privates, and that I tried to wake them up to help me, and instantly both defended him, saying there's no way he would do that, telling me I was a liar. So I let it go on. I still wonder if they were quick to defend him because they were so scared. To this day, I do not know if he had ever done anything to them or not. When we got to the church, I felt almost normal for a moment. I got to take my mind off the events of what happened. I saw more of our friends, people I knew and loved. I went and sat in the front row trying to save a spot to make sure I could see her baptism. Lee was baptizing her. So he sat me and her brother and sister next to one of the older ladies attending. She was part of the church. She was holding a new baby in her arms. I remember sitting there and thinking, what if she knows? What if she thinks I'm disgusting too? We got to chatting, and she mentioned that she knew Lee because he delivered her baby. The moment she told me, a pit hit the bottom of my stomach. All I could think of is the moment that all I could think of was in that moment of the night before. That tight grip on my wrist, the force of his hand inside me, the bruising and the tenderness in my legs from trying to push my legs together to stop him, the blood in my panties. I no longer felt normal. I felt worse than I had ever yet. I wanted to puke. I just sat there quietly, waiting for it all to be over. I remember thinking I was in a bad dream. And in just a few seconds, I would wake up and be at home, and this would all have been fake, and I would never feel this way again. So that's the initial story. And part 2 is her after, kind of what she's lived through since. And yeah. And I just want to say, Kylee, that I adore you 10 times more than I ever did before. 10 times more. Okay, so she says, living with this has almost been worse than it happening. The court process was awful. I remember the police department came over and took my mom's and I's statement. Then the news asked us if they could report it without my name to see if any more women would come forward to help out their case. Sure enough, over a dozen did. I remember the police showing up with a ton of equipment. They sprawled it all out in our dining room table and all sat around me. They told me I need to be brave now and call him and get him to confess on the phone what he did to me. My heart sank. My mom sat me on her lap and told me I do not have to do anything, but that this could really help us stop him from hurting more girls and boys. She reminded me that I am important, most important, and that she understood that if I did not want to do this, and she will support me and fight for me every way she can. So on her lap, I called Lee. This had been the first time I heard his voice talking directly to me since that night. I instantly just started crying, and my mom did too. She, however, had to try and to cry silently, as we didn't want him to know that he was being recorded. I took a deep breath and I asked him if he knows why I'm calling. He said no. I said, I want you to admit what you did to me because your kids don't believe me. And we went back and forth, but to my surprise, he did partially admit it. This was great, for the police at least, because this was enough to get him in jail until we could have trial. For me, however, this is a memory that would haunt me forever. My mom bawling and giving me the biggest, longest, most heart-to-heart hug I ever had in my life, as I could feel her wishing more than anything that she could take this pain away. Telling me how proud she was of me and how much I just helped other kids, telling me how quote unquote good I did, but I didn't feel good. I felt guilty. All I could think is that his kids will say, my very best friend, the one who already thinks I'm a liar. I felt guilty that his little daughter, who was six or so at the time, would never know who her father is. I was taking away these moments from them because their mom was not around. All I could think of is if I did the right thing or not. I didn't feel better. And this is all I want, and that is all I wanted from this. As time went on, every time as we were approaching trial, something had come up to cause Lee to, quote, push it out a little bit. I eventually grew so tired, I just wanted closure. I wanted the nightmares to stop. I wanted to stop waking up in the middle of the night and longing to sleep with my mom, so I felt safe. We went to counseling, both me individually and my whole family together. I remember I was put into a room and it was small. Had a little kid table and with 2 chairs and a few books. No windows, just one mirror. The lady who sat me in there told me that there was a camera in the mirror and that I needed to tell her what happened to me that night. She said that I am not in trouble. They just want to make sure my story is the same one since it had been a while. I kept asking for my mom, but she kept telling me my mom could not be in the room. She told me my mom was waiting right outside the doors and that she would tell her to hold her ear to the door so I felt better. She came back and started questioning me. Started making me relive the details out loud all over again. It felt like I was in that room a whole nother lifetime. And when I was out, I gave my mom that same hug as before. This time, it was me begging her to take the pain away. One morning, we got a call. A call that in most situations, and honestly, all the people close to me found as big as a relief. To this day, I still feel 100% guilty for the news we got on this phone call. on a phone call this day. I still think about the things his children have lost, his daughter walking down the aisle, not having him there, his kids getting stuck on the side of the road and not having a dad to call. Lee was on work release, and that morning he took his life. Well, I believe so. He drove into a pole right outside his work, I believe, going over 60 miles an hour. And quote unquote accident. I remember my mom seemed relieved, but not me. I will never have the closure I once longed for. I will never have the satisfaction of this being the end, of not only me not having justice, but the other 12 plus boys and girls who had the same situation with him. Never be satisfied knowing his youngest kids, never been satisfied knowing his youngest kids will never have memories with him. Although he is a monster in my eyes and always will be, she never should have known him that way. Being older now, I knew I could not change any of this, and that the guilt isn't the same. But neither is my image of myself. I still have nightmares. I still feel ashamed. I still feel gross about my body often. I always have a hard time sleeping on a couch. I always feel like an item, a quote unquote item, to especially men. It seems silly, really, to people who do not know what it feels like, but I would never wish they did. I spent the majority of my life since hiding this about myself, hiding this about my story. I recently decided I won't anymore. I am worthy, I am loved, and I am doing just fine. This is a part of who I am. This is why I love and protect the people the way I do. And this is particularly why I am so, quote unquote, brave to speak out. This is something that happened to me. This is not everything that I am. I will never have closure from this. And worst of all, I will probably spend the rest of my life with the nightmares. This is why I chose to stand up, to help prevent this from being a part of anyone else's story, and to let others know that have similar ones that you are not alone. One second. Oh, damn you, Kylee. Okay. So that's my little sister's story, you guys. And it's so crazy because I was trying to think back to how old she was back then. We didn't live in the same neighborhood when this happened because my father had gone to prison for his situation with my sister. And at least I don't think so. She seemed so much younger back then. Now it all seems so hazy now that I'm trying to think about it. But she's the same age as my little brother, so I feel comfortable in saying that she wasn't 10. Because I was 13 when we moved out of the hood. So I feel very comfortable saying that she wasn't 10 years old. But I don't know. And to know that her and her mom have always had, at least outsider's perspective, they've always had that mother-daughter dream relationship. And mind you, my two best friends that she had from her sons, the older one, the one I call my big brother, which is kind of weird because I call her my little sister, her older brother my big brother, and then her brother that's my age, he's just my best friend. He's not a brother. He's just my best friend. And always will be, no matter how silly he is. But like, I don't know. They've always had, like, the boys were always hellions, hell on wheels. And it always just seemed like Mom and Kylee had like this perfect relationship. And I am not surprised that her mom handled this like a fucking warrior, because her mother is a warrior. And one of the greatest ladies I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. She fucking hated me when I was younger, but that's fine. I was a hoodlum, and I was always causing fucking hate and discontent with her kids. We were always doing hood rat shit, me and her boys. It was always me, Derek, and Josh, and Eric. And so we always just did a bunch of hood rat shit. Both Derek's mom and her mom both kind of like, fucking little bitch, always around. But both of them love me to this day. We all grew up together. We've all grown. They are now my non-biological mothers. I love them both very much. But that's a different story. But like, I don't know. Kylee, I feel 110 times closer to you than I ever thought possible. And I'm just very thankful, dude, that you shared your story. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing so, because that was beautifully written. I didn't cry as much as I thought I would. I probably will. But I just want to let you know that you're a fucking warrior, dude. And I love you. And all of you out there who are victims to this, you are not alone. You are never alone. And even though August is gone and it is now September 1st, as of 3 hours ago, you guys still matter. Sex trafficking still needs to be stopped. Child abuse still needs to be stopped. So, if you want to tell your story from now till the end of this podcast, which I don't see ending anytime soon, I would be honored. And I still am honored. And I will always and forever be the voice of my sisters. Not just my cute adopted little sister, but also my older sister. She is half of me. I am half of her. And I've always felt more, I don't know, I'm harder than she is. I would say, I don't think she would take offense to that. She's very soft. And so I will always stand for her, and I will always fight for her, because I just believe I will fight better for her than she could for herself. Only because she is so nice. But I don't know, guys. I'm touched. And I don't know what to do, because I just want to call her now. But it's 3 o'clock in the morning. So, I love you, dude. Thank you. You guys can follow me on Facebook at It Is What It Is, a true crime podcast. And that also on YouTube, It Is What It Is, a true crime podcast. On Instagram, It Is What It Is, pod19, all together, no spaces. On Twitter, It Is What It Is 208. And I got a fan pick from Kenny coming up next. And then after that, hopefully we will have Robin's story ready. Hopefully. And yeah, leave me a review, like, subscribe, all that fun shit, share. And you guys have a great day. Bye.